It is increasingly insane to me how negative gamers are online. It's almost like hating things has become a load-bearing pillar of online gaming culture to so many people. Gaming, a hobby that you're supposed to do for fun and entertainment. If you're even watching this channel in the first place, I'm probably preaching to the choir. This channel has never really been about anything other than talking about games and subjects in gaming that I'm passionate and positive about. And even still, I am all the time shocked at what I can say that will make people mad. I've frankly given up on not trying to make people mad because it literally doesn't matter what I say. Someone is going to interpret something in a way that makes them angry. But without just exiting my lane here significantly, there has been a recent trend in the way that people are talking about certain indie games that is just so strange, and I've got to talk about it. Now, my online existence has never really been political in any way. It's not to say that I don't have strong convictions about certain issues and subjects, or that you probably couldn't figure out which way I lean by just watching the content, but it's never been even close to the point for me. I just play and talk about games. Of course, a lot of art is political. I'm not one of those "I miss when games weren't so political" type guys who lists their favorite games as like Fallout and Metal Gear Solid. But what I'm getting at here is just that if you feel like it is increasingly difficult to discuss games online without being forced to take some sort of side in an ongoing culture war, you are not alone. It's hard, if not impossible, to have a level-headed discussion about games online without it dipping into a weird political sphere that has nothing to really do with the games at all. Just for example, if you were into games like Assassin's Creed Shadows or Ghost of Yotei this year, which wouldn't be out of the ordinary since they were both popular, sold well, and reviewed well, you might be confused to look these games up online only to find a contentious and politically charged conversation around them that has very little to do with the quality of the actual games themselves. That's just where we're at now. That's AAA games, though. While it's unsurprising that some of the most visible and widely played games of each year will inevitably sometimes get sucked up into the culture war, whether they deserve to be or not, what is far more confusing to me is that this bizarre sphere of influence that I can only imagine, like me, most gamers are not interested in, has now extended to indie games as well. And particularly a very specific subsect of FPS games inspired by the 2020 bite-sized FPS roguelike Post-Void have really earned people's ire for some reason, and I just need to get to the bottom of it. Now, before I go too much further, I do just want to give a general warning. In getting to the bottom of this issue, I'm going to look at a lot of what people are saying about these games online, and particularly on Twitter, or as you may now know, at x.com, the everything app. They got everything on there, man. Everything. And if you're not on Twitter at all, good for you. Seriously. But I am still for some reason, and if you know anything about this website, you'll know people are absolutely terrible on there. So I'm going to be censoring any like slurs or just omitting otherwise truly terrible homophobic, transphobic, or anti-LGBTQ speak, to which you might be like, whoa, what? Yes, unfortunately, these topics are somehow intertwined. I will still be showing some pretty terrible takes that I do not co-sign or agree with, but that feel necessary to illustrating just what is going on here. Additionally, a lot of these games that I'm showing and looking at really earn those photosensitivity warnings, so if that's an issue for you, please take this warning seriously. Anyways, let's get into it. Within the past few years, I've experienced more commonly what I can only describe as an anti-indie sentiment arising among a lot of gamers. I find this really odd personally because while AAA gaming experiences consolidation, price hikes, layoffs, studio closures, and just in general more disappointments and high-profile flops what feels like every single year, if you're a jaded gamer just looking for something to play, pretty much any game you can imagine has been at least attempted by an indie dev. And if you can handle maybe some low-poly graphics, a little bit of jank, or just whatever quirks come with indie games, boy oh boy are you going to be treated to an absolutely endless wealth of games to play, and for a fraction of the price of AAA games. And listen, not liking or not being interested in indie games is fine as well, but I don't know, man, you don't need to then go and make it everyone else's problem. Since this channel does mainly talk about indie games, pretty frequently I experience people who click on one of my videos and then are mad that I'm talking about indie games. Like, are you lost? I get that sometimes my titles can be a little vague, like meet your next FPS addiction. And if you're like an Overwatch player who was looking for something similar to play only to find out that the video was about 2 single-player indie FPS games and one like AA at best. But in that situation, I would just, click off the video and not leave an angry comment about how I wasn't specifically catered to. And yes, that did happen. This just leads me to the unfortunate conclusion that some people are just ideologically opposed to indie games for some reason. There are definitely a lot of benign reasons this could be, like just a preference towards polished and photorealistic graphics, and that is valid, honestly. Not a valid reason to then go on a crusade against indie games, mind you, but a valid enough reason to not be interested in them if that's just what you truly prefer. I do think, though, that if you're one of those people who thinks that even AAA games have gotten too political in their theming and messaging, then indie games, hoo boy, you are in for it when you discover just how much more woke indie games can be. Again, I think not being into indie games for whatever reason is valid, even though I would strongly disagree and feel that for most people it just comes down to not knowing what all is out there or how to find indie games you might be interested in. I just land on you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink on this issue. But if you truly hate indie games to the point where you feel the need to like go to bat against them online, in my opinion, this is at absolute best extremely anti-art. It tells me at minimum that you view video games as a product that exists to maximize profits only and not art that can be created by an impassioned individual for just the sake of art. Now, the games that have most recently drawn the ire of this type of person online are what I can only personally identify as post-void likes. Now, post-void itself, I would not say is particularly controversial. It's not even all that popular to have somehow become the center of such a bizarre controversy, at least in my mind. It's a little bite-sized experimental riff on a retro FPS that released in 2020, largely before or at least on the early side of the come up of the modern resurgence of retro shooters, and its popularity and influence has really stood the test of time, with many people citing it as a major early influence as this wave of retro FPS games has kind of exploded. To give just a quick introduction to Post-Void itself, it is a psychedelic, to say the absolute least, FPS experience where you largely move forward through trippy maze-like hallways to find the exit of the level before your life force runs out. This little vial of is both your health and your timer, meaning your ultimate goal is to reach the exit quickly while mitigating damage. At the end of each level, you get some minor roguelike upgrades and you push forward until you die or reach the end, and then rinse and repeat. If there's one thing you could criticize this game for, it's just that it's an all-out visual assault. That photosensitivity warning is not just important here, it's essential. The game kind of gatekeeps itself with its visuals, but if you can handle them, the reward is great. Never have I played a game so engineered to put you in an almost trance-like flow state. And although the gameplay is simplistic and imperfect, it's a game just so much greater than the sum of its parts. And I think this is just why it's become such a popular inspiration point for other indie FPS devs. The part that completely eludes me, though, is how we got from this largely beloved niche little indie game to spawning the most hated games on all of Twitter. And that's what I really want to unpack here. While I don't think absolutely every single one of these games looks totally awesome, I do think they're all completely valid, and many of them do look cool to me. But the last thing I'd want here, regardless of my personal feelings, is to direct more hate towards these devs. So if these games look cool to you, please go support them. And even if they don't, you can just ignore them, man. Just be normal. A game that recently blew up and drew the ire of this godforsaken website was this one, called Cybrlich. At a glance, this game has fast, push-forward FPS combat that appears inspired by Post-Void, a maximalist HUD somewhat reminiscent of Cruelty Squad, and an unashamed anti-capitalist theme and messaging. On paper, it's the trifecta of shit that blue-check gamer chuds on Twitter will hate, and yeah.
Game against capitalism, game costs money. It's like a circle trying to be edgy.
So you're releasing it for free, right?
This is overall one of the more benign critiques I've seen of this game, but it's still stupid. The game is not being shy about its anti-capitalist themes, but a quick scroll through the dev's Twitter page reveals, to me at least, that it just ain't that deep. The depth of satire in this game is extremely on the nose, and it appears to me to just be an intriguing wrapper for this game and not something the developer is truly trying to send a super deep and nuanced message with. And regardless of the incisiveness of the messaging, I firmly believe that you can make anti-capitalist or anti-corporate art and still accept money for it. It's just a reality of being an artist under capitalism. You still gotta eat and pay rent like anyone else. Doesn't make you automatically in favor of like grocery prices being gouged or that you like love landlords and think they're awesome.
All this nonsense on screen and all you do in-game is circle strafe.
What's with people making the ugliest games possible?
Dude, this looks like shit. What are you doing?
2 of these are from the same account. A little bit of double dipping there. They don't even have a blue check mark. Bro is just hating for the love of the game. I think these are ultimately pretty subjective critiques, but I definitely don't think the game looks like shit. It maybe just has a pretty particular art style that I don't think everyone is going to enjoy. To my eyes, it has a nice color scheme and a competent, sketchy, comic booky art style that fits what the dev is clearly going for. To the end that there is a little bit too much going on screen, I can probably agree, but again, I played and enjoyed both Post-Void and Cruelty Squad, where I found these maximalist art styles styles really enhance the experience. So without actually playing this game, it's impossible to say for sure that this style doesn't work for it. And yeah, this like 20-second clip is in general way too short to be certain that all you do is circle strafe. I mean, even in just this short clip, there's clearly way more going on than just circle strafing. I see multiple items, equipment, and weapons being cycled through at minimum. The idea that a game with simplistic mechanics is inherently bad is something I'd push back on as well. I think Post Void, again, really nailed the balance of being simple but engaging. You really just move forward and shoot, and its relative simplicity seems to be something that not enough of the games inspired by it have retained as a core principle of their design. When it comes to Cybrlich, people can't even seem to agree if its problem is simplicity or too much shit going on. Ironically, might be a sign that the developer is doing something right. Now, the single most common thing I saw regarding this game was not poorly thought out critiques, though. It was people making massive, sweeping assumptions about the identity of the person that made it, and attacking a, like, straw man of a developer that they created in their head.
A guy with an incurable porn addiction made this.
Huh? People are really just saying shit. The irony that there is nothing sexual or even remotely suggestive about this game, while the people who say stuff like this are almost undoubtedly, overwhelmingly on the side demanding that games have sexy women in them again, is not lost on me.
Lots of you were upset when I said games can look trans-coded, but I'm glad everyone understands now.
Again, this is a line of thinking that seems to only exist among the terminally online. Anecdotally, a lot of indie games have developed communities with a much higher representation of LGBTQ and particularly trans people, but why do you care? When I first got into Ultrakill, I didn't realize just how many trans people were into the game, but I personally think it's great that for whatever reason, a lot of trans people have found a sense of belonging in the Ultrakill community. Why should that have any impact on my own personal enjoyment of the game? If anything, it makes me like the game more that trans and LGBTQ community members have been embraced with open arms in times when these people are being rejected from many other spaces, both online and in real life. But even if you don't feel that way, why should you care who else might just happen to be interested in a single player game that you also play? That doesn't make any sense. I couldn't really tell you what makes a game trans-coded either. There is once again nothing about this game that gives me any indication that it has overtly pro-trans or LGBTQ messaging. I even tried to find more info on the developer, and while their identity doesn't really matter to me personally, I did wonder if a surface level amount of research would reveal to me that they identify as trans or queer in any way, and it didn't. So again, while they might be, and I can't stress enough that that should not matter, people are essentially just making up reasons to hate this game, or drawing some kind of shoddy correlation between this game and other games that have amassed larger proportions of trans or queer players.
Your game sucks and you're
And yeah, a lot of the replies and quotes are just slurs or awful stereotypes without much else of substance. Way to go, guys. You really showed them that you're the normal and well-adjusted side here. I don't think this one really needs to be given much more airtime. I think it's really just illuminating as to the type of people who find this game abhorrent. I want to be clear that while there was an alarming amount of this kind of thing under the tweet, I do think it should be possible to just not fuck with this game without being a homophobe or a transphobe. In fact, I'd go as far as to say that the average person shouldn't look at this and immediately draw any kind of correlation between this 20 seconds of gameplay and any kind of stance, positive or negative, on the LGBTQ community at all. That's bordering on psychosis.
Ah, yes, I'd love to play Overstimulation Simulator so I can have a panic attack.
trying too hard to be quirky that it'll scare off any average player, and it looks like shit.
Okay, this is gonna sound insane, but you don't have to play the game. If the game looks so overstimulating and stressful to you that you can't fathom playing it, just don't. And the idea that this game won't appeal to an average player is, well, let's have a little perspective check here. This is a 20-second gameplay clip posted by an account with 2.5 thousand followers. This isn't a game for the average player anyways. If you're seeing it on your timeline and thinking, that isn't for me, that's fine. That's a valid response. I obviously will never convince anyone of this, but if you've ever played a game that just felt specifically tuned to your interests and just checked all of your boxes, then you should also be celebrating games that are made completely diametrically opposite to your interests. Full stop. I at least personally will play a bit of pretty much any genre, but I am just not a fan of RTS games, no matter how many times I've tried. Do I think that means RTS fans should just not be served at all? Hell no. Keep the RTS games coming. I won't be playing them, but I hope someone does. Now, the ultimate irony of this is that the outrage surrounding this game has probably been the single best marketing it ever could have received. Sure, like 9 out of 10 people are gonna see this and be like, that's not for me, but 5.7 million people saw this. That is a massive net. And even if like 1% of people are interested in this game out of that, that's a ton of exposure for a game that might have never seen it otherwise. You know, I don't even know that I'd be sitting here talking about it had this not all gone down. And the developer of Cybrlich has clearly recognized this and taken this all in stride, even going so far as to make a hate comment the banner of their Twitter profile. So I'm happy to report that this has probably been a net positive for the game and the dev, if anything. I don't know if I'll play it, but that's the beauty of indie games. It doesn't matter what I think. If you have an idea and want to make a game, it should exist. You don't need someone else's arbitrary approval to make art. Now, I want to address the criticism that this game or games like it are overstimulating, because that is something that comes up a lot for almost all of these games. To me, it is a core pillar of Post Void's design, and the degree to which that game is visually assaulting cannot be separated from its core essence, in my opinion. From an accessibility standpoint, I do understand that it sucks if you can't play it because you are in some way photosensitive, or maybe the game just gives you a headache. I was lucky enough to not experience that with Post Void, but another game called Hyperdemon completely destroyed me. It's literally the only time I've ever felt physically ill playing a game, and I just had to quit. The game genuinely seems awesome, and I really like the dev's other game, Devil Daggers, so I was bummed that I couldn't hack it with Hyperdemon for some reason. I'll just say though that being overstimulating is clearly part of the point with a lot of these games. It's okay to not want to play games like that, but does it really mean they shouldn't exist? We are so overstimulated all the time without even hardly knowing it. How many of you have made a real effort to turn off the PC, the television, put down your phone, take out the headphones or whatever, and actually just disconnect recently? I'm not judging because I have this problem too. I usually don't even realize how badly I need to unplug until I just do it, and then I remember how good it feels to like touch grass. Literally. But I also think we've grown such a disdain for the entire idea of overstimulation that when a piece of media comes along and reminds us just how overstimulated we truly are, we find it abhorrent instead of taking that negative feeling and directing it somewhere productive. I don't actually think that just being stimulated is even a bad thing at all. Like, games and media in general should be stimulating. That's the point. If being stimulated was really so bad and undesired, Bela Tarr films would be box office smash hits, not the Avengers or whatever. It's extra hilarious too that when confronted with a single clip of a game that appears a bit overstimulating, that a ton of people while on their endless Twitter doom scroll stop to comment about how bad this looks. You know, gotta farm that quick dopamine hit at the expense of this game. It's just ironic that every single one of these people immediately turn their blame towards the game instead of stopping to consider that maybe their endless doom scrolling and complete inability to not engage with content that makes them angry is actually the problem and not the benign 20 seconds of gameplay. But nope. A game within this niche that actually addressed this entire concept in an interesting way is Mullet MadJack. Mullet MadJack is an extremely direct iteration on Post Void. It's not exactly being shy about it either. It basically works the same on a core level and will feel immediately familiar to anyone who has played Post Void. Though the art style takes on a decidedly retro anime flair instead of the crunchy psychedelic style of Post Void. The game still manages to well more than qualify as overstimulating, and there's actually a narrative purpose for it. Mullet MadJack is like an endgame commentary about this entertainment and stimulation culture. Mullet MadJack himself is hooked up to a device where he has to be fast and entertaining for views or he dies. It's extremely on the nose, but it's an awesome backdrop for this game. And yeah, the game is definitely still overstimulating, and by design. I have some issues with this game, namely that quite a bit of the simplistic charm of Post Void is lost in this game's attempt to flesh it out into a campaign with like worlds and boss fights and so on. But I still admire this game a lot for its attempt to wrap up Post Void's psychedelic overstimulation into an actual narrative that totally justifies it and even says something with it. In general, I see more and more often an aversion to media that evokes any kind of negative feelings whatsoever. It's one thing if the negative feelings are just, I don't like this, or this isn't fun. Obviously, those are things the creator doesn't want you to feel. But sometimes negative feelings are intentional, and the media is actually trying to say something with those negative feelings that it invokes. It's for sure the case in something like Mullet MadJack, and while it's too early to say for something like Cybrlich, you have to imagine the dev wasn't sitting there thinking, this game has a really tame and widely appealing gameplay loop and art style until they posted that clip. Like, come on, they're clearly evoking strong feelings on purpose. Now, I do think it's fine to not be interested in or specifically seek out this type of experience, though I would challenge a lot of you to get out of your comfort zone more often. But to completely discount art that makes you feel even slightly uncomfortable is, in my opinion, once again, anti-art. Art should evoke all kinds of feelings, positive and negative, and I feel like people are completely losing their patience for art that really tests them in any way. I wish the backlash to Cybrlich had been even close to that logically coherent, but maybe some of you need to hear this for other reasons. I don't know. Now, although it went viral a while ago, probably the most visible example of this phenomenon was a game called Tamashika. which blew up late last year when a lot of devs were doing this my indie game for 15 seconds trend. Pretty similar to Cybrlich, actually. Tamashika had even more visibility though, with this tweet amassing 175,000 likes and 48.6 billion views. Insanity, truly. That's marketing numbers that a lot of AAA games wish they could pull. I actually saw this game even before all of this and thought it looked interesting. I mean, it's nothing if not a striking art style, and within a genre that I already like, no less. So I filed it away in the back of my mind and ultimately forgot about it for a bit until it resurfaced. Now listen, I'm 30 at this point, and while I enjoyed Post Void, I didn't exactly look at it and say, I need this, but faster and even more stimulating. But I also keep an open mind to indie games, especially unique looking ones, and even if I end up disliking them, I'd rather find out by just, giving them a try and deciding for myself. Maybe that's another overarching point that can be made here, is that it feels like a lot of the people hating on these games, for whatever reason, don't actually like playing games as much as they like having banger slam dunk tweets at the expense of a game they have never and will never play. One thing I will say as a bit of a neutral statement is that the developer of this game's Twitter is really confusing. I'm not sure it's any large part of why some people don't like the game, and it's difficult to say for sure, but I have to imagine that some kind of character is being played here, but to what end, I am not sure. One of my favorite counterexamples of a developer doing this sort of thing well is the developer of a game called BC Piezophile. And yes, that is the real name. The developer of this game has been one of my favorite follows on Twitter, and the way they have chosen to promote their game by acting like an alien that has no idea how to interact with humans but is kind of just faking it until they make it, while a bit unorthodox, is hilarious and has seemingly been a really huge success for a game that by all accounts should be extremely niche. So you go, BC Piezophile dev. Vidvot, the Tamashika dev, on the other hand, outside of the odd giga-viral clip from their game, seems to talk a lot about things like believing they're in some kind of simulation that they're in control of, or some kind of bizarre worship of AI algorithms. All to pretty minimal interaction. So assuming this is a marketing tactic, it's tough to say it's a very effective one, when it seems like they could just post clips of their game and development process and get millions of impressions for free without the pseudo-intellectual rambling, but I digress. In complete fairness to the dev, there is a good interview with them on GameSpot's channel where they talk about the inspirations for the game, and while there is talk of the psychedelic and spiritual aspects at play, at no point do they come off as an out-of-touch weirdo or an insane person at all, so I can only imagine this is a played-up persona for Twitter or whatever. I do find the persona a bit more off-putting than endearing, personally, but I'm trying to be fair here. This isn't a personal attack, just an observation as to why the developer may have rubbed some people wrong. The response to the actual game itself has been all over the board. Clearly there was something here that people were drawn in by when this original post went viral, with many people reacting positively to it, myself included. A lot more people reacted, we'll say, neutrally or with, confusion at best.
I had neutral opinions surrounding this game.
Thank you for your input.
Why does this game keep showing up once every few months? I don't care about it.
No girl loves me and I'm gonna die alone.
Okay, that last one sounds like a bit of a personal problem. But there was, of course, a ton of criticism as well. And unlike Cybrlich, at least a larger portion of it was directed at the actual gameplay.
Played this and it's low-key so buns and hard to read. It's just a bunch of QuickTime events that pop out of nowhere and kill you instantly.
Played this, by the way. It isn't fun to play at all. Holy shit, the colors are nauseating after 7 minutes and every enemy is a headache because if you fuck up a parry, you just have to do everything all over again.
Quite literally the most bare bones thing I've ever seen, TBH.
Plays Ultrakill once.
And yeah, there is just in general a lot of people comparing this game unfavorably to Ultrakill and Post Void, both of which I assume were direct inspirations to the game, with the overall gameplay loop clearly being similar to Post Void and stuff like the parry seeming inspired by Ultrakill. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Once again, I think this developer had a target audience and the game's visibility just leaked well beyond that for whatever reason the Twitter algorithm gods decided. And I actually see a lot of games get compared negatively to Ultrakill, and in fact I almost made an entire video on this a while back, but I decided not to. However, it's going to come up multiple times in this video since it seems to be a common talking point for people shit-talking these games. Ultrakill is a pretty different beast than Post Void in its various offshoots, and I consider it more different from most of these games than Post Void. There isn't a ton directly in common other than the first-person perspective and generally fast pace, but it's safe to say there's still probably quite a bit of overlap for people who like this brand of fast-paced shooter. Ultrakill as well definitely has its own family tree of games more directly inspired by it, but for some reason even many fans of Ultrakill itself seem to hate games that have been inspired by it. The way I see it, liking a game and getting another game like it is just, it's two cakes. You've got two cakes to eat. Nobody's sitting there pretending that Reaver or Voidborn aren't directly inspired by Ultrakill or are a replacement for it. The devs of each of those games would readily admit that. But they do have plenty that they bring to the table, and in my opinion are still well worth playing for fans of Ultrakill, and I'd recommend them to pretty much all Ultrakill fans. There's some people as well who seem to think Ultrakill just invented fast-paced shooters, leading to any FPS where you can go fast, dash, parry, and like, I don't know, shoot guns, being compared to Ultrakill or being called an Ultrakill ripoff. The weirdest examples I've seen are stuff like Paperhead, which is, I don't know, it's just a fast-paced boomer shooter. I genuinely do not see it otherwise being at all similar to Ultrakill. There's basically no direct commonalities that aren't just commonalities of pretty much all games in this genre. It's a great game, but it's just not super similar. And Technoplasm, which has a sort of superficially similar UI, I guess, and a parry, but otherwise plays so different. Much more like a first-person beat-em-up. Both great games that I would recommend, by the way, but that just are not really all that much like Ultrakill despite frequent comparisons. Or at least they aren't more like Ultrakill than they are any number of other influences. This is all to say that for me personally, I think finding a game you like and then immediately finding out there's a whole genre of games like it is cool. I don't know, that seems great to me. I don't get why people would get so worked up over this. You can still choose to play or not play these games as you see fit. Like, sure, some of them are going to be bad, but it doesn't seem unreasonable to think if a lot of people like a game like Ultrakill that there may be an audience for more similar games as well. To me, that actually tracks perfectly. And if you don't like Ultrakill or just don't want more games like it for whatever reason, you can also just ignore them. Now, don't get me wrong, while there were definitely criticisms of the gameplay, Tamashika still received a fair amount of discourse that really has nothing to do with the game as well.
I hate everything and I'm going to go beat my son.
I'm 24 and I've never been to a party. I have no friends and have never had a girlfriend.
Okay, I mean, there's honestly just a lot of people trying to get a quick zinger in because this went super viral.
I like to call this genre of game trans shooters.
There's also the usual people for some reason associating this game with trans people, despite it outwardly having nothing to do with them, nor containing any messaging surrounding trans rights or the LGBTQ community in general.
Looks like Japanese slop.
A lot of versions of this too, just calling it Japan slop because of the art style, I guess.
Every single person who avidly defended this months ago and is currently flip-flopping must apologize to all the people who were rightfully calling it the spiritual and artistic equivalent of a muddy puddle filled with trash outside of a stadium from the get-go.
Remember when you had to pretend this game looked good so that the same old shitty jerks wouldn't come down on you and label you as a miserable fun hater?
I don't know, guys. Maybe people just have different tastes than you. I don't think necessarily everyone who was hyped on this was just pretending. There's definitely at least some audience out there for this, and I'd actually bet this caught most people's eyes because it was just unique looking, and I'd imagine a fraction of a percent of those people actually had any intention to, you know, play it. It's just kind of how these things go.
Why does it feel racist?
Again, we're just vibe-checking games based on things that have nothing to do with, like, what's going on your actual screen, but okay.
I am a game dev from Israel and this is my game.
I am an indie dev from Israel and this is my game.
I am a game dev from Israel and this is my... Wait, there's actually a lot of versions of this one. Did something... Oh, son of a bitch. So, yeah. As much as I hate to admit it, the haters may have accidentally had a point on this one, since earlier this year, the explosive virality of this game got the dev legendarily milkshake ducked into oblivion. I want to be clear that this hasn't been super widely reported on, so I'm kind of just scraping together what I could find on this, and I'll just say that I tried to be as correct as I could based on the information available, and the dev has not really clarified or issued a statement or anything, so I'm just going off of what I've been able to find out there. And while I think you could search this same stuff up and come to the same conclusion, we're just gonna call it hearsay. Basically, the publisher of this game is a multimedia company called Edgelord. You can't make this shit up. Founded and owned by Hollywood film director Harmony Korine, who came under fire for his support and attendance of an event that raised $10 million for the Israeli Defense Force. Like, not just Israel or some Israeli charity organization, like the actual army that has been dropping bombs on Gaza. At risk of getting way out of my depth here on a subject that I am not knowledgeable about, I think the basic concern that your monetary support of this game could be directly funding a foreign conflict where innocents are dying every day is completely valid. And while I'm sure the reality of how this publisher's financial structure shakes out isn't quite so simple, you would think that the developer should be able to come out and denounce the actions of their publisher, break ties, create distance from them, or even just clarify the financial relationship that the publisher has with the game, and assure people that the game isn't, you know, funding the Israeli army. But, oh God. To say that it was handled poorly would be a huge understatement. The decision to not even break once from the act to salvage the reputation of your game kind of tells me all I need to know. If I missed a statement or a retraction from the dev or publisher that I couldn't find, I apologize. But basically everything on their account is worded in this kind of bizarre manner, so it's a little hard to tell what is them being genuine and what isn't. Hey, just want to interject here to be really clear that based on the evidence available, I don't actually think a purchase of Tamashika is like funding the IDF, but it's really just the developers' flippancy around this subject that makes me, and I assume many others, not want to support the game. It would just be so easy to clarify this and move on, but instead all I've seen them say about it is to the tune of the reason people are hating on the game is because of mimetics and egregores. Just on a very high level, people are being influenced against the game by groupthink. Instead, I think it's completely possible that many people have just correctly come to the conclusion that they don't want to support a game and developer that can't even do the bare minimum to clarify that a purchase of their game won't be funneled to the IDF. I live in the US and I pay taxes, and yeah, some of my tax dollars are funding Israel and other foreign proxy wars. That's just something I have to live with unless I'm willing to risk fines or prison. It is, however, very easy to just not buy a game I was already on the fence about if I'm concerned about where my money may go. That's all. Now, I'm not going to tell you to play or not play Tamashika. I won't be, but you can make your own decisions. I, however, do think you should know where your money may be going if you do decide that this game looks cool enough that you want to give it a try. My overwhelming sentiment, though, is just that I wish it hadn't gone down like this. I don't know if I would have liked Tamashika or if it would have been a hit, but I was willing to give it a shot before all of this, and that so many people decided it was worthy of being shit on before there was a real, actual reason to hate this game is pretty sad to me. And it's even more sad that these people were ultimately proven correct in their initial unfounded hatred. And in a way, I kind of think this game going down in flames the way that it did has empowered people to shit on other similar games, leading to the environment where we have this outsized negative response to a game like Cybrlich. It didn't have anything to do with this game, it just also exists and is vaguely similar. I guess at least at the end of the day, people have settled on hating this one over a genuine concern about how it was being funded and where the money it would make would be directed. But I do kind of wish this game had just had a trial by fire instead. I'd so much rather we just like or dislike games based on their own merits instead of hating them because they have a racist aura or whatever that guy said, even if that sentiment was proven to be dangerously close to the truth. Now, this channel is usually me just talking about, dissecting, and shedding light on games, and particularly indie games that I think are cool. And my hope with this video is that some much needed positivity and frankly just sense may be directed at these games that have received an undue amount of hate. So it kills me to even have to mention a game like Tamashika where the hate was arguably warranted. So to balance things out, I want to talk about an awesome game in this genre that was genuinely uncontroversial, and I think it's just cool. I'd say even eclipsing how much I liked Post Void, and that is worth looking at if you like how Tamashika plays but wish buying it wouldn't maybe kill a child in Gaza, or like Cybrlich but wish you could understand what the hell is going on screen. Allow me to introduce you to Cruel. Cruel is a game in which you fight your way out of a surreal apartment building floor by floor as it slowly burns down. Similar to Post Void, you move forward, navigating these hallways with this time pressure bearing down on you. Collect some roguelike upgrades between floors, including different weapons, interactions with your soda can, which you drink to restore health, and you can even parry bullets with melee weapons. And I swear to God, if you say anything about Ultrakill, I'm gonna... Post Void is a great game, don't get me wrong, but it's also a tiny game, and Cruel kind of feels like the perfect refinement of it. The gameplay is just really smooth and fun. The roguelike systems are just a little more wrinkly and interesting. And if you were just off-put by how aggressive looking Post Void is, Cruel manages to deliver the same style of gameplay in a much more agreeable visual package, inspired by the likes of Blood and Cultic. Cruel is exactly why I would push back on this sentiment of, well, we already have Post Void. Why do we need more Post Void? Because on its own, it's extremely compelling whether you already know and like Post Void or not. YCJY, the developers of Post Void themselves, seem to be really stoked on just how popular of an inspiration point Post Void has become to many other games. And they very often share and promote other games in this vein. So if you're for some reason mad on their behalf, don't be. Moreover, I'm also kind of wondering why Cruel escaped the hate that this newer crop of games has gotten. For one, the visual style almost certainly has something to do with it. Cruel has just a more serious and gritty style to it that might just not outwardly evoke such strong reactions from people outside of the target demographic, should they catch a glimpse of it in their endless Twitter doom scroll. But Mullet MadJack, on the other hand, leaned into that more in-your-face maximalist style, and I don't remember that game really getting hated on either. In fact, I remember mostly just a lot of excitement around the fact that more people were taking a stab at post-Void style games. And something has definitely changed, and well, I at least have a theory. Mullet MadJack released in May of last year, and Cruel in January of this year. And I genuinely just think that the world has changed rapidly and so much stuff has happened since specifically January of this year that it has just set off a rapid deterioration of the state of discourse online. Not to suggest it was great before, but many people just seem more emboldened than ever to just say terrible shit to each other. I don't know if Cruel or Mullet MadJack had released a year later, if they would have met the same fate. Maybe not, but it's hard to view Twitter and honestly the whole internet as the same place as it was a year ago. And I think that has a lot to do with it. And I wish I could say that was it, but just recently there was even more examples of this sort of thing happening. And in general, it feels like the pace at which these games are blowing up and summarily being shit on by a weird and angry part of the internet is speeding up. Luckily, it isn't always blatant transphobia or direct ties to the IDF, but it seems like Twitter users just hate this genre of game as much as the games love randomly going viral. Into the Void is a game that you might be able to guess is inspired by Post-Void and Ultrakill and many other FPS games with a highly unique wireframe art style that recently went viral for all the wrong reasons. Now, the game is great. I played the demo, I really enjoyed it, and I have become friendly with the dev of this game. But this post was the one that caught the attention of the internet, showcasing the added ability to adjust the colors of the world, which I think is really cool. I like the black and white wireframe style, but I also think allowing you to add your own flair to the game is super fun. It's something I love doing in a game like Downwell, for example, just collecting all the color palettes. And Ultrakill itself has a similar thing where you can customize your HUD color and weapons, with Into the Void just taking that idea to the extreme. Unfortunately, the dev chose the caption, "No more boring whites," which to me, and I would hope anyone with eyes, is obviously in reference to like the main color palette of the game. And it's worth mentioning the dev invalid user is, I believe, Korean, so any kind of alternative meaning here was honestly probably lost on them. But the internet, of course, chose to interpret this in the least charitable way possible.
Love how racism is just normalized now if it's against white people.
You should be shot.
This one was auto-translated, so just to be sure, I ran it through multiple different translators, and they all gave the same result. That seems a little extreme. I don't know.
Kind of racist undertone in No More Boring Whites, or maybe my brain is cooked.
To be fair to this person, the way the internet is these days, I don't blame them for just auto-assuming everything is rage bait. In this case, I don't think it is because invalid user told me directly it wasn't and was only aware of how it could come off after posting and seeing the response. But even if it was intentional rage bait, then gotcha. Like, y'all just keep taking the bait and promoting these games that you apparently hate. And like, dude, it's Twitter in the Big 25. Something far more heinous was probably posted on the website the exact same second this post went up, and I'm not kidding.
Not even going to bother the bros to stir up shit about the anti-white racism. Game lookalike garbage. Won't get anywhere.
Just gonna let that one speak for itself. This game got a fair few of the usual criticisms and comparisons as well.
Least obvious Ultrakill ripoff. Are we being actually for real right now?
Ultrakill 2?
Lame Ultrakill slop.
Isn't this Ultrakill?
It's literally just Ultrakill.
This may as well be the free space for viral post-Void inspired game tweet bingo. There's always someone calling it Ultrakill. Like, I'm begging Ultrakill fans to just play another game. Literally just one. Hell, sometimes I wonder if some of the people saying this stuff have even played Ultrakill itself, because they're sometimes just so far off base. Into the Void out of all of these games is undoubtedly more directly inspired by Ultrakill, but like Ultrakill 2? Literally just Ultrakill? Come on, man. You can't spot like any differences? Really? Nothing? Perhaps the biggest reason I can see for it here is that the color palette UI is pretty similar to Ultrakill's weapon color UI in the terminal, but I also kind of think there's only so many ways to skin a cat here. One day, Hakita, the developer of the game Ultrakill, said this in an interview. "If any of my fans or gamers were developing Ultrakill, it would suck with zero doubts. People like these just keep showing me he was right. The game looks awesome, but people are just complicated." To be fair to this person, they seem to actually like the game, so don't get the wrong idea here. I'm just using this one to make a general statement. I'm not sure what their point was with that egregious misquote of Hakita, but more to the general point of if Hakita would approve of any Ultrakill inspired games. Not only are there a bunch already, but Hakita has already given his stamp of approval to quite a few of them. So being mad on his behalf for weaponizing his words that were not originally at all intended to slander devs making games like Ultrakill, it should go without saying, is pointless. Now, the same sort of thing also happened to a game called Blood Vial made by Dylan Dev. A game that is, in my opinion, even less similar to Ultrakill. I'd been following this game and this dev for a while, so it was nice to see it get some attention in the algorithm, but once again...
So it's just Ultrakill, but less everything?
I'm gonna be real, dog. Almost every FPS has less everything than Ultrakill. That game is doing a lot. Maybe I sort of get it if it was like your first FPS game ever. You might be disappointed to find out that not every single game has you parrying, moving at Mach 5, and swapping guns every 0.5 seconds and so on. But I think a realignment of your expectations may be in order once you realize that not every FPS game is quite as insane and singular as Ultrakill.
Ultrakill?
We get it. You played Ultrakill.
Ultra Slop number 46,562,763rd of this year.
Just play Ultrakill and ignore these slop copies.
Listen, man, I love Ultrakill, but it's so singular within the FPS genre that I can't imagine trying to hold every other FPS up against it and not becoming completely miserable and jaded. Let alone, this one, to me at least, doesn't really look anything like Ultrakill. Visually or gameplay-wise. Not any more than your average retro FPS, at least. The only things I can kind of see if I squint really hard are the slide and, like, I don't know, blood as a core mechanic. But the way it's employed here is super different and unique, honestly. And is a focus on blood enough to make something an Ultrakill-like? Is something like Blood Thief an Ultrakill ripoff? I don't think so, personally. Lest we start considering something like Bloodborne an Ultrakill-like. Or is Ultrakill a Bloodborne-like? Either way, I think swimming through your own blood for traversal is fucking sick. I can't imagine looking at that and being like, damn, another Ultrakill clone. The word slop is just so aggressive and unnecessary here too. Imagine if back in the 90s when Doom released and a bunch of FPS games inspired by it started coming out and people went, more Doom slop. We wouldn't even have a genre today. You wouldn't even have Ultrakill. I am unashamedly a fan of Vampire Survivors-like games. I don't love them all, but every few months I get hooked on a new one. I don't think these are like life-changingly amazing games, but I enjoy them, and I'm happy to see more of them, even though there's already a lot. These games, though I wouldn't personally agree with this, are way easier to make than a complex FPS like Ultrakill with all of its interactions, and would be way more deserving of the title slop. But I just don't see people going after those games nearly as aggressively as any game made by a dev that has even so much as like looked at the Ultrakill Steam store page once. I think people way underestimate how much every single game is just a sum of influences. It's not to say that some games won't feel more novel and unique than others, but every idea starts somewhere. Ultrakill itself has embraced the title of Devil May Quake, which is literally just a combination of its two major influences. So what are we talking about here? Ultrakill is a game all about iterating on and celebrating influences. The call is coming from inside the house. Another stupid shooter where you hold a gun in one hand and a random bullshit item in the other just dropped.
Post-Void first-person Splatoon with low poly graphics that boomer shooter nerds will forget about in a month.
So when exactly did people start hating Post-Void so much? A few years ago, it was this beloved, your favorite game dev's favorite game type niche classic. But now that we have a few clones, Post-Void has been like irreversibly retroactively deemed slop. Like the game itself doesn't need to be held responsible for being so good that a ton of people decided to make games inspired by it, right? I have to wonder how many of these people have actually played it and aren't just assuming they'll hate it because a few devs they don't like have cited it as an influence. It's like $3 not on sale. Just go play it and form a real opinion on it. Also, I don't know, a game this small holding someone's attention for a month? That's pretty good, honestly. Not everything was made to be played forever.
Speed slop. Movement slop.
Okay, I think that person may be joking, but I don't know. I see real people saying this stuff too. Some of you need your irony licenses revoked either way. To balance this out, I do want to highlight that this game had a proportional amount of positivity around it as well. It seems that, like myself, people are finally starting to wonder why the hell this keeps happening, and rightfully delivering some positivity to this dev, who again, to his credit, has handled the influx of trolls really well, at least to my eyes. Fellas, look, it's a game that is taking inspiration and making something new, and it's not a carbon copy. Keep up the good work. How unreasonable. A normal, well-adjusted response must have slipped in here by mistake. I hate it when normal Twitter seeps into game dev Twitter and it's just a bunch of losers calling a game creatively bankrupt. This looks rad. Yeah, it's tough to argue with that. Normalize not engaging with things you aren't interested in. What a weird world we live in where everyone feels the need to chime in on everything, whether they have anything of value to say or not. This is why I get so mad when gamers say they don't make games like they used to. Like, open your eyes, motherfucker. We got Quake Splatoon and you're here bitching about wokeness. And this one is pretty much just the note I want to end the video on. If you look at a quick clip of an indie game online and see like an agenda or anything other than just like a game, I not only think that you don't belong in gaming, but I think you may genuinely need professional help. At minimum, put down Twitter and just pick up a game you enjoy. It's really just that simple. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but while it's easy enough to sit back and just watch culture warriors fight over AAA games I'm not interested in, when it starts to leak into indie games, it's officially on my front lawn. And while it was always stupid and pointless, it just feels extra weird to start imposing your whims and, God forbid, political ideologies on a freaking indie game. It's like the online equivalent of joining a small club you're not interested in, only to walk in and loudly proclaim that you think they're boring and weird. Why would you do that? Maybe I'm just old. I mean, I'm only 30, which makes me like ancient by internet standards, but I kind of apply the logic of if I wouldn't do that in real life, I wouldn't do it online. But clearly a lot of people don't hold themselves to that standard. All I can really say is that you are under no obligation to always be interacting with things you don't like, make you angry, or are just otherwise outside of your sphere of interest. And if anything, I think you may have a happier, healthier life if you don't engage with that stuff all the time. If you're a dev though, or just someone with something you want to get out there, the message here instead might just be rage bait works, I guess. It kind of sucks to say, and definitely nobody should have to deal with the type of stuff that was being flung at the Cybrlich dev, for example. But if you can handle being called terrible things and just in general dealing with the worst parts of the internet, it seems like comically easy to just get your game or whatever out there by rage baiting these days. As evident by just how many eyes got on these games from people just being mad at them for whatever reason. Yeah, I mean, if you're making a cool game, you at least have my permission to rage bait dumb chuds online for whatever that's worth. But I also don't think this state of things is even remotely sustainable. I would much rather go back to a more friendly and less interconnected internet, even if it comes at the cost of valuable marketing for indie devs. I realize as well that this entire video is kind of me doing the opposite of what I'm preaching and actually choosing to engage with and even kind of spread rage bait myself. But in the face of so much negativity online, I feel like the only thing one can really do short of just unplugging is finding commonalities and solidarity with others. So I hope if you've been feeling the weight of just how negative and contentious the internet is lately, especially in indie gaming, which historically has been pretty chill and friendly, but has recently been in the crosshairs of the culture war, then maybe finding this video can be a little dose of sanity for you. And if not, screw you anyways. Trans rights. The game kind of gatekeeps itself with its Can't fucking talk. Tweet break, this time with a slur. Love it here. I gotta get off Twitter, man. The website fucking sucks. That's the real takeaway from this video. Twitter fucking blows.